What if Robert and Cersei produced a legitimate heir? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. In the halls of the Red Keep, Pycelle hurriedly mixes potions, while midwives rush to and fro, tending to the queen who lays in bed, screaming in exertion. Soon enough, the adult's voices go quiet and is replaced by the cries of a newborn infant. Cersei and Robert stare at their first child, a girl, bearing the black hair and thundering voice of the Baratheons, with the fierce emerald eyes of the Lannisters. It is a rare moment of peace in a realm still recovering from war. The king's control is far from absolute, and many vengeful houses are eager to exploit the weakness. Robert's early years as a king are far from peaceful. Rebellions, small and large, erupt across the realm, forcing Robert to spend more time on the battlefield than on the throne. For the first few years of her life, Bara only catches glimpses of her father in the few times her father returns from war. The largest of them is the Greyjoy's rebellion. Bara, barely old enough to understand, clings to her father's leg and begs him not to go as he prepares to board his flagship to attack the Iron Islands. Cersei scolds her daughter for her weakness, but Robert laughs, lifting her with one arm and assuring her that he'll return soon. As Bara stares at her father, who is more giant than a man, she knows it is true. True to his word, Robert returns victorious. The image of her larger-than-life father walking through the throne room, dressed from head to toe in plate, clutching the driftwood crown in one hand and his warhammer in the other, sticks with her forever, especially once she lifts his visor to reveal his laughing blue eyes and fierce smile. He spent the next few nights regaling his daughter with tales of the great battles and all the sights he saw while traveling. He speaks of strange lands, burning ships, and crumbling castles. Soon enough, she begins to follow him to the training yard, where he spars with other knights. She stands just outside of the sparring rounds, emulating his movements with a stick. Once she is old enough, she demands to learn how to fight just like him. Cersei is horrified by the idea, scolding her and saying a lady should not dirty herself with swords and shields. But when Robert sees Bara making these demands, he sees a bit of Lyanna in his fiery daughter and commands Sir Barristan Selmy to train her. Under Sir Barristan's tutelage, Bara grows strong and fierce, proving herself to be a natural fighter. But with the Greyjoy's rebellion crushed, the realm enters a time of peace. She is soon joined by her siblings, Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen. While a big change, she grows to adore Tommen and Myrcella, but has nothing but disdain for Joffrey. Even as a child, Joffrey is cruel and arrogant, delighting in tormenting others. He would gladly have done the same to Bara if he didn't fear her. So instead, Bara finds herself protecting her siblings and cousin Shireen from Joffrey's torment. Cersei, however, dotes on Joffrey and becomes increasingly critical of Bara. Where Robert sees Bara's strength, Cersei sees it as defiance. She grows cold toward her eldest daughter, leaving Bara to favor her father even more, spending all her spare time listening to his stories, longing for a chance to prove herself beyond the training yard. Stannis also takes an interest in his niece, talking about the tactics and tricks he used to defeat the Ironborn. But these stories lack the flash of Robert's war stories, and she finds herself thinking of how boring Uncle Stannis can be. However, Stannis remains affectionate towards her, especially after an incident when she gave Joffrey a bloody nose for making fun of Shireen's grayscale. Jon Arryn, the Hand of the King, begins to take notice. He sees how Bara stands apart from her siblings. Where Bara is dark-haired and robust, the other children are golden and delicate, with none of Robert's features. The differences gnaw at him until he begins to investigate, piecing together the truth of their true parentage. The implications are dire, and Jon knows that Robert's fury will be boundless if he discovers the truth. More importantly, the danger to Bara. To protect her, Jon convinces the king to send her away to the Eyrie, ostensibly to be warded and possibly betrothed to young Robert Arryn. The king finds this a splendid idea, recalling his days in the Eyrie, and agrees. Bara, confused and hurt, is spirited away from King's Landing, but as she tries to hide her tears, Jon Arryn pulls her aside and promises her that this is all done for her protection. He sends her off along with his household just before he dies, ordering Lysa to keep her in the Eyrie at all costs. Bara's time in the Eyrie is far from what she imagined. Whereas her mother paid her little attention, Lysa was the opposite, strict, critical, and unyielding, as she was determined to turn her into the perfect wife for her son, Robert. The first thing she demanded was Bara trade her sword for embroidery and etiquette lessons. The young Baratheon princess bristles under these rules, but here she lacks her father's protection and is bounded by the customs of her host. She agrees, shedding her armor instead to care for Robert, though she seems closer to a sister than a betrothed as she finds herself having to tend to his needs, navigate his mood swings, and deal with his tantrums. Her time in the Vale does give her a chance to meet with the Lords of the Vale. While many do look at her warrior personality with some disdain, they are pleased to have some strong hand helping Robert, if unofficially. But while things seem quiet there, things in the rest of the Seven Kingdoms move at a breakneck pace. With the death of Jon Arryn, Robert Baratheon appoints Eddard Stark as Hand of the King. This initially seems like an excellent decision, as Bara heard of the loyalty and love between her father and her Uncle Ned. He even holds a tourney in his honor. Bara wishes to join this, but is forbidden for her protection, forcing her to cool her heels in the Eyrie. The good times do not last, as tensions flare between houses Stark and Lannister. The breaking point comes when Catelyn Stark captures Tyrion Lannister, bringing him to the Eyrie for judgment. Bara is shocked to see Catelyn arrive with her prisoner, the infamous Imp of Castle Rock. Bara stares at the little man being paraded into the Great Hall. While lords jeer and mock, she remains silent, listening carefully to hear Catelyn's story. The news is difficult to come by thanks to Lysa closing the border, so she hangs onto every word. Once the court is adjourned for the day, Bara finds Catelyn in a quiet chamber in the castle, picking at her dress uncomfortably as she looks at her.
Lady Stark, your knights told me of your journey here. You are very brave to come here and brave the mountains. I'm sorry for the losses you suffered.
Thank you, Your Grace. Though I must commend you as well. I know my sister can be difficult. You are very brave to remain here, and very patient.
Thank you. Though I don't feel particularly brave.
There are different kinds of bravery. It's not always just battles and wars, but also being able to stay where you are needed and being there for others, especially now with so much happening.
That is what I wish to talk with you about. What is happening in the realm?
There are rumors that the Lannisters were responsible for Jon Arryn's death. I recently discovered that Tyrion Lannister was involved in a plot to kill my son.
Can that be true? What could they gain from doing such things?
That is what I wish to understand as well, child. It is why my husband has ridden south. He wishes to learn the truth. The Lannisters serve themselves above all.
You say this to a Lannister.
And yet, I see in you none of her guile. You remind me more of Eddard than your father. Honest and fierce. Be cautious, Bara. The court has become a nest of vipers.
I've never met Uncle Ned. What is he like?
Honorable, brave, kind, and foolish at times. He only came south to protect your father. He is one of your father's dearest friends, and will do anything to protect your father's legacy.
It seems like Tyrion might not have been the murderer after all, as the trial by combat deems Tyrion innocent. But it is too late. Lannister raiders begin attacking the Riverlands in retaliation. Bara feels a fire ignite within her as she hears the report. Her disgust at the atrocities mingled with the excitement of finally having a chance to fight in a war. As Catelyn and her party prepare to depart, she offers to join them. But just as she prepares to act, more news arrives. News that gives her second thoughts. The first is that her father has died while hunting. The reports rock Bara to her very core as she thinks back to her father. First, the strapping young warrior she grew up with, then to the drunken but still jolly and loving king he became. She had always assumed he would live for many more years. If that wasn't enough, news follows that Ned Stark was arrested for attempting to prevent her brother Joffrey from taking the throne. 100 thoughts swirl around her mind as she thinks of her brother. While bratty, the throne is his right by law. She wonders why Lord Stark would do this, and questions what Catelyn told her about him. A messenger arrives from Dragonstone. Not just any messenger, though. The Red Woman, Melisandre. The priestess of R'hllor radiates an eerie calm as she seeks an audience with Bara. There she delivers a letter from Stannis Baratheon himself, its contents shaking Bara to her core. In the note, Stannis makes the strangest claims, that her siblings are all born of incest between Cersei and Jaime.
It cannot be.
It is truth. Your siblings are not your father's blood. They are the product of sin, a union between your mother and her brother, Jaime Lannister. Stannis has uncovered this vile secret, and now you, Bara, must decide what you will do with it.
If this is true, then my claim is the only one that remains. But why would my uncle tell me this? Why not take the throne himself?
Because your uncle is a man of duty. He knows that the throne belongs to Robert Baratheon's true heir. But make no mistake, child. There is a darkness coming. One growing stronger beyond the conflicts of men.
I am no queen. I am but a girl. What claim could I press when war rages across the realm? I will look like a usurper, like Whenever the Pretender.
You've longed to emulate your father, child. This is what it means. He did not ride out in rebellion thinking of claims, but only what was right. If you cannot do that now, perhaps it is best if Stannis takes the throne while you remain here and serve your new husband.
Very well, then. I hear Robb Stark is mustering his banners. If I join Lady Catelyn now...
No. If you leave with Lady Stark, you become more beggar than princess. Your army is here, among the men of these mountains. They know you. Make them follow you so that there is no question who you fight for. Then send letters to the Lady of Winterfell and tell her to pledge her son to your cause if she is truly a friend.
And if I fail?
You will not fail. The flames have shown me your path.
But what if I do?
Then the realm shall drown in shadows.
Taking a deep breath, Bara looks down at the letter in her hand, her mind spinning with doubts, fears, and an ember of something else. A sense of purpose. The next step is to begin gathering her army. She approaches Lysa the next time she holds court, urging her to call her banners. However, Lysa's paranoia festers, and she refuses to lend the strength of the Vale to any cause, clinging to her isolation. But as the lords hear this, they begin to grumble amongst themselves. Seeing this, Melisandre urges Bara to approach them individually. She appeals to their honor and sense of duty, reminding them of their loyalty to House Baratheon and the realm. More importantly, she reminds them that she was sent here by Jon Arryn for them to protect her. Now that the plot was exposed, to do not would be a betrayal of his hopes. Robert Arryn proves to be stubborn, but Bara finds a way with Melisandre's help. She reminds him that Lysa promised him a princess, but with this revelation, her kingdom is at risk. Doing nothing would turn his future wife into a beggar, but if he were to help her, the Seven Kingdoms would hail him as the most gallant and heroic knight. Robert Arryn is swayed by these words and overrules his mother. Soon, an army of 15,000 marches out with Bara Baratheon. She is accompanied by Jon Royce and other experienced lords to provide her with expertise. Though she is young and untested, she rides out with the weight of her father's legacy on her shoulders, determined to carve her name into the annals of history. As they approach the Bloody Gates, she looks back at the Vale, the same place her father got his start in the rebellion, and raises her sword in salute to him.
I will avenge you, father.
The Vale army winds its way through the Riverlands, passing through the Mountains of the Moon, braving the occasional attack from the Mountain Clan, which gives Bara a chance to face off against real foes. Although surrounded by more experienced men, the sight of their princess getting into the mud and cutting through these raiders helps raise morale. But these things do not get easier as they reach the Riverlands and see the Lannister brutality on full display. The stench of burnt wood and charred flesh lingers in the air as they pass through burning holdfasts and shattered villages. Bara rides at the head of her forces, her eyes scanning the ruins of villages reduced to ash. Starving peasants line the roadsides, hollow-eyed and trembling, some hurrying for shelter and others waiting to die. Bara orders her men to help whoever they can, guiding survivors to safety, sharing food, or beating back raiders. While some advise them to keep moving, Bara reminds them that she will not be a queen who ignores the plight of her subjects. Jon Royce approves of this decision and rides up beside her.
This is a land of wounds now.
The people will remember who mended them and who inflicted them. From these small folk she gathers more reports of what happened. They speak of the mountain, of knights with red lions on their banners burning their homes and slaughtering their families. Bara listens in silence, her knuckles whitening on the reins of her horse. Each tale of horror fuels the fire in her chest, hardening her resolve. A part of her is disgusted, and another part is ashamed. Though she always sees herself as a Baratheon, she knows she is half Lannister. Each atrocity is taken as a personal insult. Royce watches her closely, offering counsel where he can, but there are moments when even he falters in his faith. When she hesitates to order the execution of a captured bandit flying Lannister colors, Royce intervenes, deciding for her. The reprimanding glance he gives afterwards stings more than his words, simply reminding her that hesitation in war can mean death. Their advance does not go unnoticed. As Tywin prepares to deal with the Starks, he receives reports of Bara's army arriving. He dispatches a force of about 6,000 men led by Sir Flemont Brax to check their advance. This clash takes place in the Salt Pans, where the Lannisters try to fortify. However, the Vale Knights arrive faster than expected, and the defenses are only half prepared. Bara leads the charge with her knights crashing through the Lannister forces, who hastily try and organize themselves. Her men manage to storm through the gates before they are barred, allowing them to storm through the streets. Bara herself cuts through the chaos, her blade meeting Sir Flemont Brax in a clash of steel. He underestimates her, sneering as he lunges, but her training with Sir Barristan kicks in. With a quick sidestep, she drives her sword through the chink in his armor, ending him with a single precise thrust. Blood sprays across her armor as she pulls the sword back, her chest heaving, the shouts of victory ringing in her ears. Although only a small force, the victory raises morale among her troops, their cheers echoing across the battlefield. The people of the Salt Pans join in their celebration, thanking them for their salvation. Bara orders her ravens to send word of their triumph to Lady Catelyn at Riverrun, hoping to secure an alliance with the North and the River Lords, as they recently broke off the siege of Riverrun and captured Jaime Lannister. Seeing this, Tywin takes the majority of his forces back to King's Landing to try and secure his position and gather new levies. He does leave a small contingent, a combination of his forces and raiders under the command of Tyrion and his Mountain Clan, to harass the Vale forces. She hopes that with their combined forces, they can fall on Tywin from both sides, but the reply comes back swiftly without the answer she hopes for. The Starks and their allies were already wary of too many contenders for the throne. Many Northmen and Rivermen are hesitant to accept another Lannister on the throne. Instead, they decide to declare Robb the king of their kingdom. Her anger nearly matches Robert's. She recalls her conversation with Catelyn, who promised that Ned would support her father's legacy, and yet here she was, spitting in the face of it.
They spurn me while my grandfather remains at large?
They are weary, my lady. Another war divides us further. Let us not waste strength fighting the North or the Riverlords. They will not hinder us, at least.
Bara exhales sharply, but knows he's right. Glaring down at the map sprawled across her table, she traces her finger along the river routes.
Then we strike them where it hurts Tywin most. At the very least, Robb Stark will prevent men from the west from reaching him. Tywin has begun marching back to the Crownlands to lick his wounds. If we gain nothing from fighting the Riverlands, then we march south.
Unfortunately, they find their path blocked, as with Tywin's army near King's Landing, she finds herself unable to move south. Meanwhile, she cannot go north without risking the ire of the king in the north. She hopes to raise more levies in the Crownlands, but news soon arrives that Joffrey has now declared his eldest sister a usurper and offers a massive bounty to whoever brings him her head. The news stuns the Valemen, but rather than turning against them, it hardens their resolve. They've seen Bara fighting alongside them and witnessed her compassion. They saw how Jon Arryn risked protecting her and dying to expose the crimes of Cersei and Jaime. To them, this is just confirmation of their cruelty. But as they gather in the Salt Pans, gathering levies from the Rivermen, small folk nearby, Bara receives word of ships approaching, bearing the sigil of a flaming heart. Melisandre is quick to assure Bara that this is her uncle. The Lord of Dragonstone lands in the town, staring at his young niece. He lacks Robert's warmth, and the meeting feels more formal than familial. But there is a flicker of something in his eyes, pride, perhaps even a little affection.
You've done well to bring the Vale to heel. But we face a new threat. Renly has raised an army in Highgarden. He fancies himself king now.
But Uncle Renly's claim is even weaker than Joffrey's. How could he possibly justify it?
He has an army, and he thinks that's enough.
How can we deal with the Lannisters with this folly?
Enough grumbling, niece. The war is not lost yet. Tywin's force is diminished thanks to your victory in the Salt Pans, and having to detach men to raid and harry his forces. But if he reaches this city, he can fortify it and have the manpower to withstand a siege. If that is the case, Renly may move in and take it, as we do not have the man to oppose him. We must defeat Tywin and take this city before Renly can act. Then maybe we can assert ourselves.
Heeding these words, Bara announces to her army that they will finish off the wounded lion. The men erupt in cheers at this response, and the next day, the army marches south in hot pursuit. Lyn Corbray rides on ahead, taking the Vale's swiftest riders to harass and attack the enemy army as they retreat. Though Adam Marbrand proves to be an effective rearguard commander, the Knight of House Corbray is a ferocious opponent and they clash several times. Dozens of men die in these attacks, and while the losers are replenished as Tywin gathers recruits from the houses he passes, it puts immense pressure on the Lannister army. Seeing this, Stannis dispatches Sir Richard Horpe and Morton Waynwood to beat them to it, gathering their reinforcements and depriving Tywin of manpower. Stannis' presence adds new strength to the army. With Bara's bravery, Jon Royce's gallantry, and Stannis' discipline, the army moves with renewed vigor, catching up to Tywin and forcing him to halt and meet their advance just outside Rosby. By now, the Lannister army numbers 8,000, and the Baratheon forces over 20,000. But on the night before the battle, the strangest thing happens. While standing over the walls of the castle to monitor the enemy forces, Tywin tumbles off the parapet towards his death. Some say he feared facing Stannis, others claim he couldn't bring himself to fight his granddaughter, and some even claim the shadows came to life and attacked him for his sins. Without Tywin, Kevan manages to rally them and organize the battle lines, but his loss shakens the army up as they march out. They meet in a thunderous clash of steel and flesh. The Vale Knights, led by Lyn Corbray, drive into the Lannisters' left flank, which is their weakest link. The young Vale Knight whirls through the battle lines, Lady Forlorn cutting through foes left and right, and the forces commanded by Lord Craighall struggle to hold their line. Bera charges alongside them, her sword cutting through her grandfather's bannerman. Years of experience come forward, her ferocity in full display as the young knights of the Vale surround her. On the right flank, Stannis' forces press hard against the Lannister center. The Valemen infantry are stiffened with his narrow sea houses and a few levies from the Crownlands and Riverlands. The disciplined Valemen push forward, their shields locked as they drive Kevan's pikemen back. Kevan rallies his men, urging them to hold. He proves a capable commander, deploying the reserves to support the failing left flank as he takes command of the center. The Lannister archers rain arrows upon them, but the Baratheon shield walls hold firm. Slowly but surely, the Lannister line begins to buckle. Jon Royce and his heavy cavalry add to the chaos by hitting the right flank hard. Though the disciplined men under Adam Marbrand hold, it prevents them from helping their comrades. More importantly, it allowed a small force of volunteers led by Sir Davos and Clayton Suggs to strike at the Lannister camp. They overpower the defenders and set fire to the tents. Seeing the Lannisters' banner being ripped down and replaced with the stag of House Baratheon, the enemy forces break as Westermen rush to save their belongings. Kevan roars and tries to gather as many men as he can, but it is no use, and he is soon captured. Bara looks toward King's Landing, the city's distant silhouette glowing against the horizon. Without Tywin's army to defend them, the Lannisters in King's Landing have no choice but to yield. As word of the victory spreads, a rider brings news from the capital, where there is mutiny. The Goldcloaks have rebelled and opened the gates for them. Cersei and her siblings have now been detained and await punishment. When she hears the news, Bara grins at Stannis.
The Iron Throne is ours.
However, as they march towards the capital, a second rider meets them on the King's Road. Rather than coming from the capital, this man rode south from the Stormlands. Robar Royce of the Rainbow Guard.
I've come to deliver a message on behalf of Renly Baratheon. He wishes to discuss terms with his niece.
In Renly's camp, Bara watches as the murmurs show that Renly has organized plays out for her, a show meant to honor her. and her victory. It starts with a young girl with dark hair born to the king and queen. She watches as this little version of her settles in with her father to listen to his stories of battles and fighting. But the stories soon become reality as Robert marches off to deal with the rebellions of his kingdoms, leaving Bara alone with only the memories of those tales to comfort her. As Robert returns, she vows to walk in his footsteps and trains with Sir Barristan to become a warrior. Tears begin to sting her eyes as she watches those happy days come to an end as she is sent to the Vale, while the story of her betrothal to Robert Arryn is their next pretext. In reality, it was a precaution to keep her safe from the Lannisters, as Jon Arryn soon discovers a terrible secret. Bara's siblings, or at least those she thought were her siblings, were bastards born of incest, leaving her the only true heir to the Iron Throne. That does not stop Cersei from trying to usurp the throne. She gasps as she watches a boar gore her father during a hunting trip. Though only a murmur in a costume, she grips her seat and reels from the betrayal. This shock turns to anger as she sees her younger brother, Joffrey, take the throne in her place. Rather than simply accepting this loss, the scene shifts as the murmurs add props, rocks, and trees to recreate the Mountain of the Vale. There, the one playing her stands atop the tallest boulder and rallies the Vale Lords to her side. Together, they march out to the Riverlands and engage the Lannister forces rampaging them. She bloods herself in this war, winning victory after victory alongside the Knights of the Vale, and later the Men of the Narrow Sea as Stannis joins her. And amidst these campaigns, in the dead of night, a great shadow appears and swallows up Lord Tywin, leaving the Lannisters without leadership. This leads to a great clash in the Crownlands, where Bera and her army defeat the remaining Westermen. As the play comes to an end, Renly's men erupt into cheers, clapping and stomping their feet in approval. However, Bara remains seated and glances at the massive pavilion where her uncle is staying. He said he wished to discuss terms, but insisted on these honors first. It is only when the cheering dies down that he finally gestures for her to join him in his tent. He pours her a drink first and smiles.
It seems you've made quite an impression on the young men, my niece.
Indeed. But I am more concerned with what you intend to do with these swords you've gathered, Uncle.
Are you worried? You've been spending too much time with Stannis. Isn't it obvious?
Is it?
No, I suppose not. But that skepticism will help you survive. Yes, I confess that these swords were initially meant for my claim, but you must see things from my perspective. After Robert died, the succession was in chaos. I had no idea what you would do, nor Stannis. If I did nothing, the Lannisters would have been able to secure the Iron Throne. I gathered the Stormlanders and the Reach to rally my side, to take the capital for our house.
For our house or yourself?
Have a little faith in your uncle, child. Yes, I will not pretend as if I never pictured myself on the Iron Throne, but I am no kinslayer. You are my niece, and I will not usurp your claim. However, as it happens, your small council needs positions.
And you have some ideas. Very well. We will discuss it, but only after you've sworn allegiance to me.
Renly does all of this, bending the knee in a public ceremony in front of his men. But that is just one of the remaining claimants. There remains the young wolf in Riverrun, and the remaining Westermen. Bera initially thinks picking off her grandfather's surviving army would be easy pickings, but this proves to be more difficult than anticipated. They rally under two groups, one under Gregor, who continues to raid the Riverlands, and another under Tyrion, who retreats to the Mountains of the Moon. He's won the allegiance of some of the mountain clans, who now shelter him as he raids the domains of the Vale Lords. Suddenly, Bara finds her army at risk of being cut off, and the Valemen are eager to return home. Meanwhile, Robb has been declared king in the north, and the word treason hangs on many lips as they urge Bara to ride out and punish him. But that would only be possible with the Stormlands and the Valemen. This means her next decision is clear, confronting Tyrion and his clansmen. Leaving Renly with his army, Bera sails north while young Royce leads the Valemen overland. As soon as she arrives, she is greeted by Lord Nestor Royce, who was organizing the Valemen left behind to begin driving back the Lannister invaders.
The situation grows dire. The clansmen have entrenched themselves in the mountains, stifled by the Imp's men. They were troublesome enough,
but with good steel and experienced men-at-arms, it can take months before we drive them out. They strike elsewhere. Our forces are stretched thin, and the small folks suffer.
We'll drive them out, but we must be smart about it. Tyrion Lannister is no fool.
As they march out, Bera Har's reports of these attacks by the mountain clans and their brutal tactics, like rolling down stones on narrow passes, setting fire to the underbrush, or slitting men's throats as they sleep. But none of those things happen on their march. It doesn't stop Bera from riding at the head of their men. After several days of complete quiet, a figure at last emerges from the mountain passes, a Lannister man with a white banner, claiming that Tyrion, Lord of the Mountains, wishes to speak with her. Bera agrees to meet Tyrion in a narrow valley where a village not on any map appears. Tyrion is easy to make out, along with an assortment of knights and clansmen. He smiles as he sees his niece.
Ah, so my little stag has finally come to visit her uncle.
Uncle Tyrion, I'm sorry I wasn't able to help you during your trial.
I understand, my dear. I doubt Lysa Arryn would have wanted you anywhere near me, but the past is the past. I come here to negotiate. I have terms. You granted me and my men amnesty, and will withdraw from the Vale and cease our raids. In return, I'll pledge the loyalty of the West to you.
Those are bold words, Uncle. I'm worried the clansmen might have rubbed off on you.
I can speak boldly, dear niece, because we are family. Or have you forgotten that? You are still half Lannister, though you may not like it. But the gods have given us the gift of a powerful name. As queen, it is your right to use it to ensure peace, as it is mine to bring the Westerlands to heel. If you truly value family, does that not extend to me and what remains of House Lannister? If you accept my offer, you get the West, and I get protection.
Very well. I accept your terms. You and your men will have amnesty. Withdraw from the Vale, and there will be no further bloodshed.
But not everyone shares Bara's sentiment. Varys soon catches wind of this decision and begins to spread the word of this, talking about how she is willing to forgive Tyrion despite his part in the War of the Five Kings, along with many of his soldiers. The Vale Lords grumble about the leniency shown to Tyrion, but they are happy to be rid of the mountain clans. But no side is as agitated as the Starks. They see the agreement as a sign that Bara is willing to forgive the very man who pillaged their lands and slaughtered their people. Northmen shout that Bara is half Lannister herself, and across the Riverlands, many disparagingly call her the Lion Queen rather than the Stag. Varys continues to spread these rumors, reminding them the Mountain is still at large with his men, and warns how she has not sent men to take his head. Bara learns of Robb's outrage through a missive delivered. Justice cannot be achieved while the lions are coddled. Your decision has made clear where your priorities lie. Do not expect the North to march under a banner that forgives its enemies. This message weighs heavily on Bara, and yet, rather than be shamed by this letter, Bara is angered by the insolence and soon crafts her own letter, reminding Robb that this war began when Catelyn unjustly kidnapped Tyrion Lannister, and how it was her, not Robb, who finally defeated Lord Tywin in the Battle of Rosby. She says she is willing to come to terms, but only if Robb puts aside his crown and bends the knee to her. It is met with the approval of Renly, Stannis, and Melisandre, who all consider Robb Stark as a usurper. However, none of them like the prospect of a campaign in the north, or declaring war on the Riverlands, which were already so ravaged by the Lannisters, lest they look no better than Tywin. Instead, Renly suggests simply isolating them and refusing to trade. Should winter come, they would be hard-pressed to survive without the grain from the Reach or Vale. Bara orders choke points and borders to be fortified along the Golden Tooth, the Mountains of the Moon, and God's Eye to prevent any northern incursions. However, she refuses to allow any raiders to strike either, punishing those who break the Queen's peace. The only exception to this is the Mountain, who refuses to leave the Riverlands, making it impossible for Bara to deal with unless she sends an army. Varys jumps at this opportunity, making it seem as though Bara is allowing the Lannister raiders free rein until the Blackfish tracks the Mountain down and kills him. Another sticking point remains, the exchange of hostages. While many noble hostages are exchanged throughout the stalemate, two people remain firmly under lock and key, Jaime Lannister and Sansa Stark. Neither side is willing to part with these valuable hostages for anything less than a complete acceptance of their terms. Soon, a Cold War develops where both sides refuse to move, but neither monarch is willing to back down. fueled by the mistrust sown by the spider. But as they look at one another, some houses beneath them begin to show signs of uncertainty. House Frey has blood ties to House Lannister and wishes for peace. Meanwhile, several houses in the Vale are not fully satisfied with Bara's handling of Tyrion's raids and feel more sympathetic to Robb Stark. Although there is peace, the Seven Kingdoms are built on a tinderbox ready to blow. All eyes focus on the war between them. Not even the death of Daenerys from a manticore bite sparks any interest. It is in the chaos that Varys decides to strike. He approaches the court of Robb Stark, presenting himself as an exile from the royal court, one who was driven out by Bara, and offers his services to Robb. While distrustful of the eunuch, he provides the young king with a tantalizing piece of information. The Golden Company in Essos claims to have a Targaryen prince in their midst, the son of Rhaegar, whom Varys had spirited out of King's Landing during the fall of the city. He has little love for the Baratheons nor the Lannisters, and will make a natural ally against them. The information is intriguing, but Robb is hesitant to accept it. He recalls the cruelties of the Mad King and all his father's efforts to overthrow him.
A betrayal, is it? You act as if this Baratheon dynasty is deserving of your loyalty. Though a friend of Ned, King Robert was a fool and a drunk, and Ned paid the price for his loyalty. Next is the mad boy Joffrey, who ruled with cruelty and fear. And now we have young Bara, brave and strong to be sure, but who pardons those men who have caused your house such suffering.
And yet the Mad King was worse.
And the Mad King is dead. This boy would not even know his grandfather or his father thanks to Queen Bara's own kin. Would you hold this boy accountable for the crimes of his grandfather?
The question lingers on Robb's mind. Though he doesn't like it, the other lords urge him to consider it. If they are not going to accept Bara as queen, then surely someone else would be better suited. Wary of inaction and determined to free his sister, Robb agrees to this and orders Varys to hire the Golden Company under the pretext of reinforcing the wall after the recent wildling invasion. But beneath this claim, a secret alliance is formed. In exchange for Aegon VI's aid in rescuing Sansa, Robb will bend the knee to him. Ships discreetly begin to transport men to White Harbor under Robb's supervision. As this process happens, he is approached by another former member of the Baratheon court, Peter Baelish.
What brings you to Winterfell, Lord Baelish? Has Queen Bara sent you here to discuss terms?
I am here to present my terms and opportunities. The Vale is restless, torn between loyalty to Bara Baratheon and the memory of Erie's friendship to the Starks. With the right persuasion, the Vale could declare for you. And with its knights at your back, you could sweep the Trident and crush your enemies.
What persuasion do you speak of?
A marriage. If I were to wed Lysa Arryn, I may convince her to rally the Vale Knights to your side.
You would marry my sister. She is unstable and dangerous.
Unstable, perhaps, but loyal to her family, if properly guided. Bara Baratheon is young and malleable, a queen only in name. If Lysa believes Bara has slighted her and poisoned the memory of her beloved Robert, she will act decisively.
After much deliberation against Catelyn's protests, Robb agrees. The marriage is quickly arranged, and Lysa sees this change as a small price and declares for the king in the north, denouncing Bara Baratheon as an unfit queen and dissolving her betrothal to Robert Arryn. Lysa's declaration plunges the Vale into chaos. House Arryn, Grafton, Corbray, and Belmore rally to Robb's cause, along with several more. But other houses, such as House Royce and Waynwood, remain staunchly loyal to Bara. As all eyes are on this new conflict, the Golden Company emerges from the neck, joined by their northern allies and troops from the Riverlands. The tenuous peace that the realm knows shatters in an instant. As Bara gets news of this, she begins organizing a counteroffensive. Stannis and Sir Richard Horpe ride toward Harrenhal with 10,000 men, hoping to secure this vital point and secure their borders. They arrive just as Jon Connington arrives and lays siege to the fortress. The siege drags on for weeks as the Northerners and Golden Company try to breach Harrenhal's formidable walls. The Northmen organize small raiding parties to disrupt supply lines from the Crownlands. Yet these hardships are nothing new to Stannis, who survived the siege of Storm's End. This time, though, Renly is assembling an army from the Stormlands to reinforce them. The vanguard forces Jon to break the siege, though not before badly bloodying the royalist host. Meanwhile, Tyrion orders Sir Adam Marbrand to lead the Westermen to make a strike at Riverrun to try and free Jaime. However, by now the Riverlords have fortified their side of the Golden Tooth and halted their advance, preventing them from advancing any further beyond their initial gains. Lysa Arryn's declaration for Robb divides the Lords of the Vale. The most decisive engagement in the Vale occurs at the Battle of the Bloody Gate. The rebel Vale Lords attempted to seize the narrow mountain pass that guards the entrance to the Vale. The rebel forces, led by Lord Jon Royce, captured the Bloody Gate, but faced off against the full might of House Arryn and sellswords recruited by Littlefinger. However, a diversionary naval strike by Lord Valerian at Gulltown allows Sir Davos to smuggle reinforcements to the Bloody Gate, cutting the Vale expedition off from their home, where they lay siege to the Eyrie. As this war rages in the Riverlands and Vale, Barra strengthens her position by marrying Willis Tyrell. The Reach, with its vast wealth and powerful army, declares support for the crown. Under the leadership of Mace Tyrell and Randall Tarley, the Reach army marches north, threatening to cut off Robb's southern advance. Barra joins this army and marches into Stony Sept, advancing through the southwest. Edmure must now gather reinforcements at the Golden Tooth to convince his forces and meet this oncoming assault. However, Adam Marbrand takes this opportunity to renew their offensive and manages to break through, sending men to reinforce Barra's advancing army. However, Aegon VI joins Edmure and convinces them to join the battle, just as they reach Pink Maiden. Though they are expecting a siege, Edmure unexpectedly assembles his forces outside, stiffened by soldiers from the Golden Company. The disciplined soldiers prove their worth, holding the Reach back for a time and preventing them from advancing any further. Edmure organizes his armies into deep squares with pikemen in the front and back and longbowmen in the middle. These rain arrows down on the advancing Reachmen, causing horrific casualties to their advancing forces. But this holds them back. They are outnumbered almost 3-1 and begin to give ground. That is until Aegon deploys over a dozen elephants that rampage across the overcommitted Tyrell forces. The infantry are panicked by the sight of these beasts, and their tightly packed formations makes them easy prey for the elephants. They soon scatter and Barra is forced to retreat on the border. Robb is also working to halt Stannis' advance in the central Riverlands. Though Jon Connington failed to stop him from capturing the castle, Robb reinforces him with men from the Riverlands and north and some surviving Valemen. Determined to halt Stannis, Robb devises a bold plan to outmaneuver the older commanders. Stannis positions his forces near a fjord along the Red Fork, intent on forcing Robb to attack him head-on. Renly leads the vanguard, engaging Connington with the levies from the Crownlands and Stormlands, driving the Golden Company back. Soon they begin to push back the mercenaries and the few Northmen with them, yet while they drive back, they do not break, and the fighting lasts throughout the day, swinging back and forth until the Stormlands cavalry arrives to reinforce them. They charge against Jon Connington, but as they advance near a thicket, they find it filled with archers commanded by Greatjon and Galbert Glover, breaking their momentum. There, Lyn Corbray launches a counterattack. A few Riverlanders led by Black Walder Frey and Robb Stark secretly cross the Red Fork, using a fjord they know of, and rush towards their flank. Accompanied by Greywind, the wolf terrifies the Crownlander troops who flee in disarray. At the same moment, the Golden Company launches a counterattack that drives Stannis back. Robb's direwolf, Greywind, tears through the battlefield, adding to the chaos. Robb personally leads a charge into the fray, cutting down several of Stannis' bannermen and nearly reaching the Baratheon commander himself. Stannis, realizing the battle is lost, rallies his remaining forces into a disciplined retreat, preventing a total rout but leaving the battlefield in Robb's control. Renly manages to break off as well, bloodied but alive. However, their numbers are far greater than the Stark Targaryen forces, and Barra is already beginning her advance once again, now stiffened with Westermen who managed to break through the enemy lines at the Golden Tooth. Seeing themselves outmaneuvered, Edmure Tully and Aegon VI pull back and try to consolidate their forces with Robb and Jon to create a force large enough to crush Barra. But rather than let them join forces, Barra urges her forces forward. The reinforcements by the Lannister army increase her confidence, and she soon gathers her forces for a battle and writes to Stannis and Renly to join her. However, before the battle, Ser Barristan presents her with a wrapped bundle that he brought from King's Landing, the Hammer of Robert Baratheon. He had said that she wasn't strong enough to wield it, but after years of queenship and fighting, she lifts it. She can barely hold it properly. She holds the hammer close and thanks the old knight.
If I must die today, I will die as my father's daughter.
The armies clash at dawn along the banks of the Blackwater Rush, where the rising sun casts long shadows over the battlefield. Bara's forces advance with grim determination. The stag banner of House Baratheon flutters defiantly in the wind, flanked by the rose of House Tyrell and the lion of House Lannister. At the front of her forces, Bara advances, wielding the warhammer and clad in the antlered armor. Though it still feels strange, she moves with a sense of purpose, knowing this will end the rebellion. Edmure Tully and Aegon VI hold a nearby ridge, where they rain arrows behind a defensive crescent. Golden Company mercenaries, grim and disciplined, form the backbone of Aegon's line, spears bristling in perfect formation. The casualties are already mounting as they try to storm the hill, as the light infantry Bara sent ahead begins to falter, retreating behind their pikemen. Seeing this, Aegon deploys his elephants once again, but little do they know that Bara secretly had those same skirmishers drop caltrops on the ground. Soon enough, the elephants' charge loses all momentum as they panic, rearing up in pain and allowing Bara to rush forward, leading the charge against that hill. Sir Barristan is close behind her, shielding the queen with his own body as they charge up the hill. Bara's forces charge forward as arrows rain down, cutting men from their houses and piercing gaps in their armor. Bara spurs her steed forward, her warhammer raised high. She smashes through a cluster of Riverland infantry. Men scream and scatter before her, and those who don't are cut down by Barristan the Bold, whose movements cut through the enemy infantry, widening the gap for her men to charge. However, the charge has taken its toll, and of the 500 men who joined her, perhaps half remain. She spots Aegon's banner on the right flank and charges toward him on foot. Her hammer swings with bone-crushing force, scattering the mercenaries who try to block her path.
Aegon, face me.
Aegon hears her and turns, black fire gleaming in the morning light. Clad in an ornate black plate, he steps forward, his guards forming a protective circle around him. But with a sharp gesture, he waves them back.
The Iron Throne is mine by right. You are nothing but the daughter of a usurper.
A usurper who crushed your father's chest like a walnut. Let me show you how that felt.
Bara swings her hammer in a brutal arc, and their duel begins. Aegon moves quickly, his blade flashing as he deflects her strikes, but the force of it sends him sliding back. Bara doesn't let him recover and continues to fight with raw, unrelenting fury. But Aegon's swordsmanship is precise, almost elegant, and as he thrusts his blade forward, it punctures her armor and causes her to stumble. Aegon takes this chance to knee her and send her stumbling backward. Another cut wounds her shoulder, but as he attacks again, she swings low, the hammer striking his knee and sending him stumbling. With her last bit of strength, she smashes into Aegon's chest, caving in his breastplate. He collapses to the ground, gasping for breath. Bara raises the hammer again, and for a brief moment, Aegon's eyes widen with fear. Then the hammer comes down, and the Pretender King's reign ends with a sickening crunch. The death of Aegon sends shockwaves through the rebel ranks. The Golden Company falters, their discipline shaken. Bara's forces press the attack, sensing victory within their grasp. But even as the enemy wavers, the banners of the Direwolf appear on the horizon, Robb Stark's reinforcements. Robb's army crashes into Bara's left flank, their charge swift and devastating. Grey Wind leads the way, tearing through the Baratheon lines with savage fury. The Northern and Riverland forces cut down Bara's exhausted men. Sir Barristan tries to escort Bara to safety, cutting through more than a dozen ways to lead her across the river. But as they reach the bank, Grey Wind pounces on the old knight, and for the first time, his reflexes fail him, as the direwolf tackles him and sinks his teeth into the unarmored armpit. Bara tries to help her protector, but her injuries get the better of her, and she drops the hammer as the Northmen surround her. The people of Wintertown all rush out to watch as the royal procession of Robb Stark returns from war. Row after row of Northmen march by to their friends' and families' cheers. Yet not even this sight is the center of attention. Today, the North is greeted to a sight they have not seen in thousands of years. A defeated monarch. At the center of the column, Baratheon, the stag, rides by, tall and proud, but in chains, while the rest of the army is bathed in cheers. She is greeted with boos and hisses. In front of her, a herald marches ahead, announcing her.
Behold the Stag Queen, true-born daughter to Cersei Lannister and Robert Baratheon. Raised as a warrior and rose against the Lannisters during their usurpation, defeating the great lion host that burned our southern domain. And yet pride comes before the fall, for she did not recognize the efforts of King Robb, or their efforts to bring justice. Instead of peace, she demanded servitude from the north.
Bera does not say anything, though her eyes narrow dangerously. She looks toward the king, who remains silent as well.
If the Iron Throne will not help the north, then they shall find no friends here. Instead, we raise up a new king, Aegon VI, the only son of Rhaegar who promised to recognize our new kingdom and free Sansa Stark. Yet in the war, our brave king fell in battle with the Stag Queen. But such a defeat did not go unavenged, as the king in the north has now captured her.
With this, the crowd cheers once more, as Bara is led into the gates of Winterfell and disappears into the castle. Once away from public eye, the guards pull her off her horse and Robb faces her properly.
Chambers have been prepared for you as befitting your station.
How gracious of you.
You will also be given freedom of movement around the castle, if you swear that you will not try to escape.
I am in a cage either way. At least this is a cage I am aware of.
Robb motions for his guards to escort her to her cell. Rather than a cozy tower cell, she is instead taken to a dungeon. Yet, rather than protest, Bara quickly makes her way inside. But she isn't alone. Another person is waiting for her.
Hello there, Bara.
Uncle Jaime.
Not father?
Seeing her horrified face, Jaime begins to laugh.
Calm down, niece. You're not mine. I was brought here after your recent war to make sure that I am not freed.
Before she can protest, the guards push her inside and shut the doors behind her. In King's Landing, the capital, is a flurry of activity. Although the death of Aegon VI is welcome news to the court, Bara's capture sends them scrambling for solutions, short of acceding to Robb's demands, recognizing them as an independent kingdom. Alternative terms are sent out, offering Sansa in exchange for Bara, but these are rejected. Though Robb has left to return to Winterfell, the Blackfish has taken command of the Riverland's defenses. In the meantime, Lord Manderly commands a naval strike on Gulltown, landing Donald Flint and Galbert Glover to lead a relief force against the Eyrie to break the siege. As the naval forces of White Harbor and the Vale clash, a small ship commanded by Sir Davos sneaks onto the north with Melisandre. Soon enough, Stannis attacks from King's Landing, and the Lannisters strike out once again from the Westerlands, while Renly leads a host from the south. The Baratheon and Lannister troops are fueled with vengeance after hearing of their queen's capture. The Blackfish fights them across a dozen minor battles, trying to halt their advance at every turn. He's joined by Lords Blackwood, Bracken, Malicer, and Piper, as well as some remnants of the Golden Company and a few Vale Lords. But their forces begin to get pushed back. The news forces Robb to march south after gathering fresh levies to reinforce his great-uncle's forces. Back in her cell, Bara has nothing to pass the time save dealing with her Uncle Jaime.
Joffrey, Tommen, and Marcella. Are they truly yours?
What do you think, dear niece? Do they look anything like you?
No, and thank the gods for it. Joffrey was a monster, and the others, their names are stained, and the rumors never leave them. All because you and Mother thought it was clever to lie to the whole world.
You think I don't know that?
And yet you did nothing to protect them.
Protect them? What do you think I was doing? Do you think I could have tended to them with every scraped knee, or scolded Joffrey for every act of cruelty he did? Even your father would have noticed something was amiss. Unfortunately, not all of us can be great heroes like you.
Apparently not.
Don't act so high and mighty with me, girl. Your father was a drunk and a shit king.
True, but at least he had honor.
Are you sure you're not Ned Stark's spawn with what you say? Did honor stop Robb Stark from crowning himself king, or the Vale from turning its back on you? What did you think would happen? That the people of Westeros would look at you and see the warrior queen they always wanted? But they didn't, did they?
Bara's hands curl into fists.
Ask any of them, and they'll tell you what they were doing was honorable. They would say they were obeying their liege lords, dig up some slight against you and your house, or that Lannister blood taints you. And who is to question them otherwise? Who decides what is honorable and what is not? The gods? If so, they have been silent. No, it is only men and what men perceive.
For a moment there is silence between the two. Bara stares down at her boots in silence. A part of her wants to deny it, to defend her father, and to curse Jaime, but she cannot bring herself to do it.
A bitter taste, isn't it? Finding out you weren't the hero of this story after all. They will not accept you, not unless you make them, or simply let them freeze when winter comes. It makes no difference to me.
You know, I once heard my father say that he was grateful to have your family by his side. He was drunk then, but he said he would never be able to sit the Iron Throne if it wasn't for you, doing what the heroes couldn't do.
Suddenly a sharp cry echoes down the stone chamber, followed by the clash of steel. Jaime lifts his head, alert. Before either of them can react, a shadow snuffs out the torches, its dark blade slicing through the bars as the figure looks at them. His features remain distorted, but Bara could have sworn that it looked like Stannis. The figure doesn't speak, instead beckoning her to follow. Bara hesitates only for a moment before stepping forward. Whatever's happening outside, it's her best chance. She turns back to Jaime, raising a brow.
Are you coming?
You can stomach a Lannister's presence on your dashing escape.
I traveled down the moon with Uncle Tyrion. I think I can do the same with you. Besides, I may need a monster by my side.
Before I do, tell me, my children, Marcella and Tommen. I know Joffrey's not amongst us now that you sit on the throne.
They're safe. Marcella serves me as a lady-in-waiting, and Tommen is free to play with his kittens.
Jaime studies her, searching her face for deception. Finally, after a long pause, he reaches for one of the guards' fallen swords and follows. The shadow creature leads them through the empty halls, slaying whatever guards get in their way, before leading them through a postern gate where it enters. Below it is a moat and a rowboat with two figures, Sir Davos and Melisandre. The two offer her a smile as Davos rows them to safety. The four ride out of Wintertown, leaving the Stark castle behind them. With Bara and Sir Jaime now in their custody, nothing is holding the Baratheons and Lannisters back from crushing this rebellion. Yet this plan all goes awry with the arrival of a storm. It rages across the narrow sea, turning the water into a torrent, throwing Davos's ship around as rain slams against his face. The old knight shouts at his men, trying to maintain order as he battles against the winds. Below deck, Bara clutches a wooden beam to keep herself from being thrown as the ship pitches violently. The candlelight flickers wildly, casting jagged shadows across the cabin. Jaime braces himself against the frame of the doorway.
Tell me, Bara, was this part of the plan? Or has your Lord of Light decided we should all drown together?
You mock the Lord of Light, but I can hear his voice in the flames, whispering to me. This storm is his gift.
If this is a gift, he can bloody well take it back.
Sail north, he says. Sail to the edge of the world, where the darkness awaits.
North? Have you gone mad? We'll freeze to death before we make it to land.
Continue to the south, and the storm will tear our ship apart. But sail north to the wall, and the ship shall carry us safely to shore. It will deliver you where you are needed most. The wall. That is where destiny calls you.
Bara watches her carefully, the words settling like cold steel in her stomach. She turns back to Jaime, who shakes his head.
You can't be serious.
Yet, Bara orders Davos to change course, turning the ship around. To their surprise, it is just as Melisandre predicted. Though the ship rocks and shudders amidst the storm, not a single soul is lost, and by morning, the waters are as clear as ever. The wall looms in the distance along the East Watch by the sea, where the black-cloaked figures emerge from the docks. By the time Bara and her party disembark, the Night's Watch meet her. They recognize Bara and Jaime immediately, and promise to not report this to King Robb. But only if Bara brings word south. There is trouble on the wall. Dead things have begun emerging from the mountain. Melisandre steps forward, her eyes gleaming. While Jaime and Davos are incredulous, Bara listens.
There is more than disorder here. There is a great darkness coming. If left unchecked, it shall consume the north.
Bara looks down at her hands, recalling what Jaime told her. Force the north to follow you, or let winter come. For the first time in her life, Bara has no army, no crown, no war to fight. The people of the north had rejected her before. She clenches her fists.
I will win them over.
She orders Davos to sail south and tell her uncles what is happening, to tell them that she lives but needs them to gather a force to come north. She also says that she is willing to make peace with Robb, but only if he returns north. Meanwhile, Melisandre will accompany them, as does Sir Jaime, who will act as her sworn sword. Before they leave, though, Davos retrieves something from his ship, a wrapped bundle that contains Bara's warhammer. Taking it in her hands, she tearfully embraces her companions.
Sir Davos, I have no idea what will come here or whether I am right. So please tell my uncles one more thing.
Yes, Your Grace.
Tell them I love them.
The winds howl through the frozen expanse of the far north as their small group rides long and hard through the wall. Bara, Jaime, Melisandre, and a handful of rangers rush westward to the hardest-hit area, where the Whites are appearing, the Bridge of Skulls. Across the Great Chasm are dozens of those creatures. They find rangers and wildlings organizing defenses, setting up earthworks and barricades to stop their advance. On the slopes, archers and crossbowmen try to hold them back. Bara moves with her hammer in hand. The battle is quick and brutal. Bara's hammer shatters bone and brittle flesh, while Jaime wields his stolen sword with lethal precision, hacking them to pieces as the Night's Watch warns, leaving nothing to chance. The leader of this force, Jon Snow, approaches them.
Of all the people I expected to see at the edge of the world, you were not one of them.
Desperate times call for desperate measures, Lord Commander. What is the situation? Has the war been breached?
No, not yet. But the dead come through the Bridge of Skulls, dozens every day. At first we thought it was just scattered remnants of Mance Rayder's army. But then, they didn't stop. We killed them, but they keep coming. More and more every day.
I thought the wall was supposed to protect us from them. The old stories say it was built with magic.
So did I. Old Nan always said the wall would hold so long as the Night's Watch stayed true. But after Craster's Keep, the mutiny, the betrayals, the corruption, maybe we're not true anymore.
The weight of his words linger. The wall was supposed to be the last line of defense, but now cracks are forming. Not in the ice, but in the men who guard it.
There will be enough time to worry about that later. Right now we must hold off. I've sent word to Sir Davos to bring reinforcements.
I've done the same with my brother. I suppose we just need to hold out until then.
Jon Snow explains the best weapons to fight them are fire and dragonglass, but they do not have much of the former. Bara sends ravens out to request both from Tyrion. In the meantime, Melisandre reaches for one of the ranger's swords and kisses it. Suddenly, fire begins to emerge from his blade. She does the same with the others, and soon the men are cheering. For the moment, their spirits lift as Melisandre wipes her bleeding lips. For the next few days, the Whites ramp up their attacks. From dozens, they grow into hundreds, but they are met with the fury of the Night's Watch. Melisandre's magic and the Queen's presence ignites a fire in these men that wasn't there before. It was as if the Night's Watch of old came back with a vengeance as they fought through wave after wave of the undead. At their head is the Kingslayer, who moves through the Whites like a whirlwind, cutting them down as fast as they come. Day after day, reports are sent to Castle Black and Eastwatch with one sentence: the Bridge of Skulls stands. Soon enough, reinforcements start to trickle in. As Jon's words are heard, Northmen begin to arrive. Men from the mountains and Molestown, from Last Hearth and Bear Island. These are old men, cripples, and grizzled lords who were left behind during the war. They are surprised to see Bara there, and more than a few wish to arrest her. But Jon reminds them that she is under the Night's Watch protection, and if they are there to help, they must focus on the foes in front of them. It isn't just the North who are sending reinforcements. Smugglers and pirates under the employment of Stannis also send help, dragonglass and wildfire to arm the Night's Watch. Many reluctantly agree, turning their swords to the bridge as the nights grow colder and the days grow more violent. Rather than slow down, the attacks only seem to increase in intensity. From hundreds, the Whites now grow into thousands, as the magic is fading too vast. Every night, Melisandre prays to the Lord of Light, looking into the flames for any signs. But each time she sees the same thing: the Shadow Tower going up in flames. On the 10th day, the Whites attack in force, smashing into them in a massive assault that leaves their position on the Bridge of Skulls untenable. This time, the attacks are led by several White Walkers, who slaughter most of the defenders. One of them nearly kills Bara as it drives its sword into her side, but she's saved by Jon Snow, who beheads it with Longclaw. He calls for a retreat as they pour back into the Shadow Tower, leaving the White Walkers to gain a foothold south of the wall. The night is thick with frost, the air so cold that each breath burns in their lungs. The Shadow Tower trembles under the relentless assault. Bara stands at the barricade, her grip tightening around her warhammer. The men beside her, brothers of the Night Watch and Northmen, fight desperately against the endless tide of the dead. Arrows fly, steel rings against ice, but the enemy does not fall like living men. Whites swarm the defenders, clawing, biting, overwhelming them in sheer numbers. For every one they cut down, 5 more take their place. But for every one of the living that falls, the dead raise their numbers.
The magic has gone too far. The wall is failing.
Then we have to go. We have to get everyone out.
Bara glances at the Shadow Tower, its walls cracking, its defenses crumbling. A thought strikes her. Desperate, reckless, but their only option.
If we can't hold it, we can make sure they don't keep it either. Narasandra's fire might be failing, but we still have Uncle Tyrion's gifts. The wildfire.
The plan is set in motion within moments. Jon leads the effort, guiding men through the tunnels beneath the tower, where the barrels are kept. Melisandre helps while Jaime and Bara protect them. They place wildfire in the supports, right at the very foundation, but also within the castle itself. The green liquid glows ominously in the dark, pulsing like a living thing. Their remaining forces stream out of the castle towards the road. The last of them is Jon, Bara, and Jaime, who ride out, leaving Melisandre alone there.
A gift to the Lord of Light.
A single spark ignites the wildfire. The explosion rips through the night, a column of green fire swallowing the tower whole. The heat is blinding, the roar deafening. The Whites caught inside are incinerated instantly, their bodies reduced to nothing but ash. But the debris falls on them like a rain of 1,000 flames, adding to the chaos. For a moment, it seems like they've stemmed the tide. And then, from the ruined gates, the White Walkers emerge. Not just from the Bridge of Skulls, but from the gates of the wall. The ground quakes as the army of the dead pours forth, thousands of Whites following in their wake. The Shadow Tower is gone, but the enemy is not.
Fall back! Retreat to the Queen's Crown!
They flee into the frozen night, their numbers dwindling with every mile. Wounded men collapse, too exhausted or too cold to continue. By the time they reach Queen's Crown, they are barely a fighting force. Castle Black emptied its garrisons to help them, but they soon find themselves under siege. And then, the horn sounds. Once. Twice. A third time. At first, they think it is another trick, another cruel reminder that the wall no longer holds. But then, banners appear through the trees. The dire wolf of House Stark, the flayed man of the Boltons, the mailed fist of Glover, the Manderly Merman, the trout of House Tully, the Frey's twin towers, and the eagle of Mallister. 10,000 men march toward the battlefield, led by Robb Stark himself. The battle is short but decisive. The Northmen charge, cutting through the Whites with fire and steel, pushing them back just long enough to secure a retreat. When the fighting is done, Robb stands before the battered survivors of the Shadow Tower, his eyes locking onto Bara's.
I suppose I should thank you.
Suppose you should.
The battle rages on, the night air thick with the clash of steel and the roars of men fighting against the endless tide of the dead. Whites climb over one another, their sheer numbers making it impossible to hold a solid line. Their eyes burn with cold fire. Their limbs are unnatural and unyielding even when cleaved apart. The Northmen and the remnants of the Night's Watch fight desperately, but their numbers dwindle with each passing moment. Bara swings her warhammer with all her strength, shattering bones and caving in skulls. Through the chaos, Robb Stark fights his way to her side, slashing through a White and kicking its corpse away before turning to her. In his hand is a blade she knows too well, Blackfire. In the few moments of peace, the two monarchs find time to discuss what happened.
Your hand agreed to a ceasefire. The war is over, at least for now. You had something to do with that.
He wouldn't have stopped it if I was still in chains. He would have fought you for the last man to get me back. I sent him a raven telling him I was safe.
Safe? A bit of an exaggeration. But you were here. Why? Why not leave the North to its fate?
How could I claim to be queen if I had damned in by people?
Thank you for staying.
The horn sounds again, this time from the south. A wave of fire erupts across the battlefield as reinforcements arrive. Not from one, but 3 armies. Tyrion Lannister directing Lannister and Westerland soldiers, their siege weapons hurling wildfire into the undead horde. Great plumes of fire spread across the undead ranks, buying them time to escape and regroup. The fire spreads as the dead collide with each other, turning the battlefield from icy cold to burning hot in an instant. Through this, Stannis Baratheon leads his disciplined Crownland and Stormland troopers into the fray, his voice carrying over the chaos as he orders a steady advance. They form an unbreakable wall, spears thrusting out, and pots of wildfire being hurled overhead. And finally, Renly Baratheon, dazzling in his green and gold armor, leads the Knights of the Reach and Dornishmen in a bold cavalry charge, slamming into the undead ranks and then retreating before they are overwhelmed. Flames engulf the battlefield, whites screaming as they burn. But the Night King does not falter. He remains at the center of it all, his ice-cold gaze locked on the defenders. He raises his hand, and more whites rise from the fallen, undoing much of the work the living have done. He stands atop a small rise, wreathed in ice and death, watching. Robb and Jon see it too, and the trio mount up and ride hard, leaving Jaime to command their forces. Melisandre follows close behind. She watches as the dead begin to swarm them, White Walkers and undead beasts rushing from all directions. The Red Woman utters a prayer to her god and then leaps off her horse. At once the dead are upon her, tearing at her body, but she feels no pain and begins to sing. Her ruby flickering before the flames explode, engulfing the whites, turning her into a great funeral pyre, clearing a path for them. Jon slashes at the Night King's blade in an explosion of frost. He rains down attacks, but the Night King parries each strike. Bara arrives next, swinging her warhammer in a brutal arc at his ribs. The Night King effortlessly dodges, and with a flick of his wrist, he sends a wall of frost crashing into her, the cold seeping through her armor. Robb attacks next, driving his blade toward the Night King's chest. But the ancient being catches the blade mid-strike, letting out a shaking wail from their blades. With terrifying speed, the Night King grabs Robb by the throat, lifting him off the ground as ice spreads from his fingertips. Robb struggles, his skin turning pale as frost creeps around his neck. Jon roars in fury, charging again, swinging Longclaw. The Night King turns just in time, releasing Robb and pulling back.
How can we beat him?
Focus and pretend it's me you're hitting.
She rams into the Night King with her shoulder, but gasps as she instantly feels the cold rushing through her. Though it sends the ancient being stumbling back, she swings the hammer with all her strength. It slams into the Night King's ribs, sending a web of cracks through his frozen armor. He stumbles, just slightly, his first misstep. But his sword thrusts out, ripping into Bara's side and leaving her screaming in pain as that area goes numb. He begins to twist the blade, but Jon suddenly slashes Longclaw across his blade, having it explode in a shower of sparks and icy crystals. Fighting through the pain, Bara takes this chance and drives her hammer forward, stabbing the dragonglass spikes through his chest.
How does it feel to die?
The Night King's eyes go wide as Robb swings black fire and decapitates him. For the first time, the Night King staggers. The moment he falls, the dead collapse. Thousands of whites drop lifelessly to the ground, no longer bound by the magic that animates them. The White Walkers crumble into ice and dust, their ancient will erased in an instant. Jon Snow staggers, his breath ragged. Robb drops to his knees, exhausted beyond words. Bara lets the warhammer slip from her fingers, her breath visible in the freezing air. The war is over. The living have won. After that, all sides agree that neither one is in any shape to fight a war, so instead, a peace deal is forged. To unify the realm, a marriage pact is agreed upon with Robb Stark and Bara Baratheon, uniting the two fractured kingdoms. That's our theory. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the Seven Kingdoms and beyond, then please like, share, and subscribe to our channel.